Everyone, and thank you for checking in um, to another video on faith stories. Um, really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know you probably have better things to do with your day, or maybe you're just tuning in because you need something to listen to on your drive or commute home or to work. But either way, thank you for tuning in, and I really appreciate all the comments and likes and shares. And even if you don't listen or tune in or watch, by all means, please feel free to share and invite others to check out the channel. So just to start out, if you or someone you know has a story of faith, of Christian faith, I would love to hear about him. I would love to hear their story and to get to know them and just document um, their journey. So if that sounds like you or sounds like someone that you know, please feel free to reach out, connect us together, and I would love that opportunity. So today I wanted to make a video about a reflection, really, a reflection back to my first interview, um, and that was with um, a United States CB. If I remember correctly, I believe that's through the Navy, so Navy CB, Leon Pratt. Now, the backstory of that a little bit here is my adoptive parents. I went out for my sister's graduation, and obviously I know who everyone is, so we're all chit chatting, catching up along the way through the weekend. And Leon, who's my adoptive mom's father, um, we just, over time, just gotten to know each other a little bit more. He lives in Michigan, and I've always lived in California, so our paths never really crossed unless he came over throughout the year or whenever. And every time I've seen him, he's always talked about his experiences through life, whether it be in the military during Vietnam, whether it be growing up on the farm, whether it be his life as a photographer for, I believe, one of the sheriff's departments, where he lives, or lived. Um, Definitely in Michigan for sure. I believe it was maybe even for the state troopers for Michigan. So I know there was some sort of connection to law enforcement. Um, and his stories always fascinated me. And so, while we're working on a project at my parents' house, or whether we're sitting outside enjoying just the sounds of outside, or reading a book, or sitting at the table, drinking coffee or something, um, it would be anywhere and everywhere. Even at my sister's graduation, in the middle of the hoopla of post ceremony, he would start talking about his experiences. And so I've always been fascinated by people's stories, but specifically his. And it just occurred to me that weekend when I was out for my sister's graduation. These stories are so fascinating, and somehow he always connected them to God and his faith. And so I remember thinking, okay, God, if this is something you want me to explore, I'll do it. I do find it fascinating and interesting, but no one's really going to listen. No one, I don't really have the time to do stuff like this. And I'm just, if I'm still thinking about it, 3 days later, okay, I'll go through with it maybe. If I'm still thinking about a month later, for sure, I'm going to go through with it. Sure enough, I end up going through with reaching out and asking him, hey, would you feel comfortable and being okay to share your story and how it all connects to God and faith? Because I've found your stories so fascinating. And he was so willing. He was ready to do it. And yeah, so that's how that started. And I wasn't expecting, I'm still not expecting this to be some Joe Rogan type podcast or YouTube channel or anything like that. It's just a way for me to document people's stories of faith, because I find them so fascinating. And I think part of the fascination is I struggle with my own faith sometimes. And what I mean by that is sometimes I wonder, man, I wish I had that much faith. I wonder if I'm ever even going to go to heaven, because sometimes I feel like a hypocrite. Sometimes I feel so arrogant. What makes me so special that God will allow me to come into His kingdom? And I still wrestle with those types of questions. And I don't know that I ever will not struggle with that question or those questions. But when we look at the Bible, it's a collection of people's stories, and their stories of faith, including Jesus. Jesus still had to have faith in the Father, that the mission was what He was there for, that dying on the cross and suffering for people's sins, that was the whole point, of His faith. And so we have a collection of stories, if you will, about people's faith. Obviously, there's still the story of the gospel and the message, but um, just looking at it at face value, you have a collection of stories of people's faith in God. And so I want to do that, because I find some people's stories fascinating. And some people have declined to share, whether it be time or just preference, and that's okay, whatever. But there are fascinating stories out there that actually don't even make it to the channel, that I've just been honored to hear. So today, the reflection is, what were some of the key takeaways? What were some of the things that I remember most, or walked away from with my interview with Leon? Um, One of the big things that for sure stood out to me was other people's prayers and other people's faith can affect you. Um, I'm kind of blanking on some biblical references to this. Um, but something that's really, one of the reasons why that stood out to me is, one, because of his own story. He had people in Michigan, his family, praying for him nonstop for his safety and his safe return home from Vietnam. And I found that such a cool story. I mean, just a cool concept that other people's prayers and other people's faith can have an impact on you. One of the things that's maybe coming to mind, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe maybe someone who has more theological basis and learning can correct me on this. I think of the story of Rahab. Obviously, the people of Israel, they're trying to come into to Jericho, and they're the people of God. They have faith in God, or they have some level of faith in God. And Caleb and Joshua are the only two that really have the strongest faith of, like, God's going to get us through this, and it looks horrible. It's not looking good, but we're gonna go through with it. And as they send out the spies and they go out there, they tell Rahab, put out a sign, and when the walls come down and when we take over the city, you and your family, your household will be safe. And so their own faith in God helps protect Rahab and her family. And through the line of, well, not the line of Rahab, but in Rahab's line of family, including David, Jesus the Messiah comes through. So Rahab, Jesus, David, Abraham, all those people are connected in the same family line. And so someone else's faith and prayers can have an impact on you. And this has really hit me more recently, because I've seen my wife's faith really, really grow in the last few weeks, both in good times and in hard times. And seeing her faith and her prayers be answered in the smallest, most trivial ways, even, or what seems trivial, whether it be for our safety, whether it be for finances, whether it be for hopeful outcomes. Man, my wife's prayers have been answered, both for myself, our children, and for other people. And she's even talked about one of her prayers for someone else, someone else's family, someone else's child, and it seemed like it was answered that day. That child was healed in some way, or recovered. And so one of the biggest things I learned from that interview with Leon was other people's prayers and their faith can have an impact on you or have an impact on others. And I love that. One of the other lessons, and maybe kind of a stark turn here, one of the stories of that interview was when he came back from Vietnam, and how and I had watched documentaries prior to the interview, not at all because of the interview, but just I never learned about Vietnam in growing up, and I never learned about Vietnam in high school. It was never talked about. And so watching multiple documentaries on it, and it was just a hot mess, to say the least, and there was no reason for us to be over there. And so to see the way that he was treated, for something he had nothing to do. I mean, obviously he was involved in Vietnam, but not because necessarily he wanted to be. You know, Vietnam was infamous for the draft, pulling people in and people not or refusing to go serve, and some people getting rid of their numbers and just going MIA and missing. So his number was picked, and he ended up going to Vietnam. And just the way that people treated veterans from Vietnam that came back that maybe had nothing to do with it, didn't want anything to do with it. You know, I'm not a fan of that. And so the key takeaway from that was along the lines of not being don't be surprised by the way people treat you, because everyone's going to have their own opinion, and always expect people to, you know, have maybe a negative view, even if they don't understand your position. You know, if you go back and listen to the interview with Leon, it wasn't necessarily a good experience. It wasn't necessarily a positive one. Sure, lots of friendships and connections were made with other people, and sure, maybe there was a lot of life skills learned. But listening back to the story and just the horrors of Vietnam in general from other veterans, it wasn't a good experience for anyone. And I think it goes back to that saying, you know, treat everyone with kindness because you don't know their story or what they're going through. And I think that's true for Leon and so many other veterans, especially from Vietnam. And you never know. You never know what someone's going through, and you could make their day or break them. And it's just unfortunate that the people that we asked to serve by force, we also treated like shit. We disposed of them. And that's unfortunate. Now, I'm guilty of this myself, even on a daily and weekly basis, to kind of be a jerk and to kind of be very stark towards someone, even someone I don't know. And I know nothing about them. I don't know what they just went through today. I don't know what their story is. So maybe the takeaway is really, you know, treat everyone with kindness because you don't know what they're going through. And last but not least, one of the key takeaways too was that God is involved in everything, even when it seems or feels like He's not. In the story, or in the interview, Leon talks about the attack on his base and how close, and I mean literally physically, how close he was to death, both for himself and others. And those same prayers and those same people's faith and God It kept him literally this close to and from death. And we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have had the honor of listening to that story, not just of Vietnam, but of faith too. God's involved in everything, even when it feels like He's not. You can look at Job. You can look at Jesus. You can look at Peter and Paul. You can look at Gideon. You can look at Abraham. I mean, all these people were afraid, doubted, didn't want the outcomes to happen. I mean, Jesus even said, if there's any way that that I can avoid going through this, please show me a way out of this, because I'd rather not do it. Jesus said, take this cup from me. If there's anything else, let's do that. And so God's in everything, even when it feels like He's not. Even as Jesus hung on that cross, He repeated the Psalm of David, but my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you left me? Why did you abandon me? But God was there the whole time. God never left him. But sometimes it feels that way. God's in everything. He's in the way that we treat people. He's in the way that we go about our day. He's in the ways that things go left really quick. He's there. Even David said, if I go down to the depths, if I go down to Sheol, you are there. If I go to the highest mountaintop, you are there. David also said, although my mother and my father have abandoned me, the Lord has taken me in. So God's in everything. So those are the things that I took away. God's in everything. Treat people with kindness, because you never know what they're going through. And other people's prayers and faith can have an impact on you and others. I hope this helps you. I hope this helps other people, and maybe this will help spark some sort of interest in not only discovering God more, but maybe just exploring what Christianity is. And again, thank you for your time, and thank you for checking in. If you like the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share it, comment. I make it a point to comment on everyone, or at least respond to everyone who leaves some sort of comment. And again, if you or someone else you know has a story of faith they'd like to share, I'd love to connect with you. So until next time, thanks again, and have a good day.